And some kidneys they have around, they didn't communicate yesterday, they are offline, and they'll just randomly come at that hour. Oh, I forgot to tell you.
Joseph, how do I get the link again? Room 4. How do I get the link? Wait, guys, I'm going to jump into the other room.
Sure.
The other room. How do I explain? The room
How
I'm
do you do
supposed
what?
to be coding for Rayman.
Cynthia, you can see the right? Babal is finally here. Cynthia, can you hear me? Cynthia? Lama. Okay. Mika, can you hear me? Okay, great. Lama, you can now hear me. I think you have a problem with I don't know what's up with you guys. Abala, can you hear me? Okay, great. You just restarted your phone, I guess, because I think that was my issue. I think Lama also has the same challenge. They can also restart your gadget. Cool.
I guess you're loud and clear.
Oh, thank God. Okay.
Prefer to live in a world where superhero genre did not exist. So I'm going to be your chair for the round, and I'm going to have a panelist with me, Arnold. So hopefully, proposition
My audible?
Yes, you're audible, but I don't know if Cynthia is still on the call. It seems like she wanted to restart the phone.
Oh no, I restarted my phone. It's okay.
Okay, cool. So if you're on the call, all speech is 8 minutes. I'm going to be keeping a background time on my side. Please time yourselves too. We shall be giving you timestamps in the chat space. Without further ado, may the Prime Minister start the debate here.
I want to confirm if I'm audible again.
Yes, you're loud and clear.
All right, so I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. This house prefers to live in a world where the superhero genre does not exist. So we as Team Proposition basically think that this debate can be about only three things. A, why it is better to live in a world where this genre sort of exists from Team Opposition, but also from Team Proposition. We think that we need to show you why it is then bad for us to prefer to live in a world where that sort of genre exists, right? First, what do you think that this debate still has from characterization? What do we think that the superhero genre then looks like? I think that this sort of looks like a category of fiction that typically, features characters with extraordinary characters, things such as powers, skills, and things such as abilities, right? What we then think these sort of things look like? These are people who mostly are portrayed to be sort of like fighting against evil people, but also these are people that are then looked at as people that are, trying to save the world and all that. That is basically what is portrayed through that gender, right? What we then think that it is much better to prefer a world where these things do not exist. First, from prop, we shall show you all the bad things that come with preferring to live in a world where such exists, right? But also from team op, within that they then have to justify why a world where such a genre is like existing is much better. Three things we need to show you. First, who buys into these particular sorts of things, chair? From team proposition, it is quite clear from status quo what these particular sorts of people look like. These basically look like Superman, but also Batman and all the likes, right? What do we then think? Like, who do we think then basically sort of buys into this sort of genre? We know that people that then largely buy into this particular sort of like art are people who are like, teenagers, but also people who are like the youth, right? Why do we think that this is true? We think that this is true because these are the sort of audiences that are targeted by these particular sorts of movies, but also these are the sort of like age groups that basically have the time to buy into such things, but also watch them, right? Why do we then think that this is sort of like problematic still? From Team Propcha, notice that these particular sorts of individuals, because of their sort of like nature, because they're like, basically young but also curious, these are people whose futures are then shaped based off what these particular movies portray, right? We think that then this sort of shapes their beliefs. Why do we think that this is true? We think that this is true because it then inspires children sort of like grow and want to sort of solve the problems that are portrayed in the movies, but also want to grow up and act as heroes that are portrayed in those particular sorts of movies. But also thirdly, these are children who grow up to look at these particular sorts of heroes as the only people that are probably trying to save the world, but also are doing are doing like good in this sort of like world, right? Why we then think that that is problematic from propaganda? Notice that when people grow up thinking that heroes such as Superman or like probably Batman are the only people that are doing good in this world, or probably the people that then save this world, we then think it is problematic. Because these children sort of like grow to be inspired to become those people, but also notice that these people do not like sort of fight real problems, right? That entirely means that we get a generation of youth that are probably are probably going to like grow up and want to fight problems portrayed in these particular sorts of movies, or probably these are people who lack any sort of understanding from the problems that actually affect society, but rather are more like sort of like driven
Clarity.
to like dive into problems that are portrayed in these particular movies. What then we think is actually important. Yeah. We think that it is important to raise a generation where children actually buy into real problems that affect society. Notice how largely these children then do not have that sort of sense, because all they are exposed to are the problems in this particular sort of movies, or like the villains that are portrayed in this particular sort of movies. We think then we lack out, or like we lose out on true inspiration, but also we lose out on kids having real like role models, because they grow up to want to sort of like look like these particular individuals. 3 problems are going to give you from Team Prop. A, why we think that there's basically some level of suppression of other genres coming from this sort of like superhero like sort of genre, but also we shall show you why this like particular sort of genre is unrealistic and why we didn't have a problem with that. Thirdly, we shall show you the glorification that comes with the sort of preference of such a genre and why that is problematic. Firstly, we think that a team that wins this debate is the one that is actually going to address the problems that are brought about by this sort of like genre. A, the unrealism, but also secondly, they have to show us why then they need, okay, like a team that wins still has to show us why we then get inclusivity, even when we clearly show you that this sort of genre sort of suppresses other genres. I'll begin with that. Notice how in status quo, movies like the best movies in the world are looked at this particular sort of movies that are sort of like produced by companies such as Marvel and DC, probably because they have the most buy-in, right? What then happens is there is a loss of diversification, because everybody now wants to sort of like look at those movies as the ideal. What happens is growing genres such as Nollywood and Yugawood are then going to sort of like not have buy-in, probably because people look at the other kind of movies to be the best, right? Notice how still like Ugandans basically do not even want to buy into their own movies, or probably Nigerian movies, because they do not have superheroes in them, right? Notice how still this is sort of bad, right? Why we think that this is actually true from both sides, and we think this is something that these people cannot kick away, is because even at award ceremonies, most of the people that actually win awards are people that actually play in those sort of movies, right? Why we think that that is then bad is because these other sort of like juniors are then sort of suppressed by this particular sort of junior, right? Notice how that is problematic. The truth is, people never get to actually buy into the real problems. Notice that even if someone made a documentary or probably a movie about the problems affecting Ugandans, people would most likely not buy into it, but rather buy into a more fictional superhero movie, right? What I think that is problematic is people then lose out on the like literal understanding of what problems actually exist in society, but also people never get exposed to such problems. What happens is the problems affecting people in society then never get solutions, but also largely never get anyone acting upon them. I'll take you.
People act to maximize their preferences. At a point in time where I prefer something like romance or I prefer superheroes, tell me why it is wrong for me to go and watch what I prefer.
Sure. We do not think that it is necessarily bad for people to have choice. That is an sort of like a case that we expect Team Up to run, right? Why do you think that it is still bad that people buy into superhero movies, even if they want to talk about choice? Notice that children growing up, like we already told you, that people that sort of buy into these genres are basically teenagers, right? Why do you think that then it is bad for these sort of people to be exposed to that? Notice that even when someone has their sort of choice, we think that it is much important that actually that particular sort of individual has like the sort of ability to understand what problems exist in like status quo, right? Even when you have like that sort of choice, you know that it is much better for that sort of individual to realize that they have some sort of obligation towards their society. We already tell you that people do not get access to that particular sort of like thing, because anyway, this sort of like superhero genius then sort of like suppress others, right? What happens is these people have a limited sort of choice, because there's already things such as like there's already things such as peer pressure. So the point in time when every teenager is buying into such a genre, most likely I'll be forced to like sort of like subscribe to that, even when it is not like necessarily choice. So we think that then Team Up cannot come and like sort of argue for choice, because we already tell you that these people are pulled by like sort of some sort of peer pressure or probably societal pressure to buy into these genres, not entirely choice. I beg to submit.
Okay, thank you for that fine speech. I would now like to invite the first opposition speaker. Here, you are reminded to keep background timers. I won't be recording anything after 8 minutes, 15 seconds.
Okay, hopefully I am audible. I'm requesting for a few seconds as I set up my external timer. Pop your eyes, kindly unmute and ask. I'm gonna take the first one, like aren't in the chat space because I'm using the same device to time. So I'm going to start 2 minutes and 15 seconds on my timer. So my speed starts in 3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, there is a need to understand what this debate is about, but then also what this kind of like genre, what this kind of superhero genre looks like. Yeah, let's first get into rebuttal and see what side proposition gives us. Yeah, side proposition comes here and says that this particular movies are in most cases or are only watched by children at the end of the day. Sure, this is a very big fallacy at the end of the day, because even the reasons they give you are not enough to support this. They say that these are only watched by children because firstly they're the ones who mainly have the time to buy into these things, but then also secondly they are made to like attract them at the end of the day. We think this is not true, because notice that even individuals who are beyond, for example, who are beyond 18, then in most cases are going to create time for relaxation, or in most cases are going to have time to give they're going to have time when they're resting and when they're also doing things that they prefer to do at the end of the day. We believe that the fact that only children have time for these particular things does not make sense, because if that was true, then we would have only children relaxing and indulging in things that they enjoy, and you wouldn't have people maybe beyond the age of 18 relaxing. We believe that the fact that people are going to have time to relax and indulge into things that they enjoy, and these movies are going to be among things that they enjoy in most cases, means that not only children are going to indulge into these things, but every human being who gets time to rest and do things that they would want to do in their free time at the end of the day. Moving on, secondly, to maybe their thing on that in most cases these movies are only attracting the children. We then again think that this is not true, because in most cases the concepts that are put in these particular movies are not only things that would be enjoyed by children. These are in most cases are real life problems or real life things that everyone in daily life would then relate to, and that's why we believe that people beyond the level of children are also going to buy into watching these particular movies at the end of the day. The second thing we have a problem with is that they come and say that children need to understand real problems happening, and that in most cases these movies are always talking about things that are unrealistic at the end of the day. Notice that then in most cases these movies are actually talking about real life problems that exist in the society in which we are living at the end of the day. It is then a movie like Wonder Woman that is then going to be made. In most cases, it's trying to break a stereotype of like sexism in most cases, or like women are not allowed to do specific things at the end of the day. We then believe, that when you have certain things existing in movies, this breaks the fallacy that they come and say that these movies are only portraying things that do not exist in society, or they're talking about, or they do not have any sort of aspect of like the actual problems that exist in society and have to be solved at the end of the day. But then, another thing that they come and talk about is that the only reason why people then get to watch these movies is because of peer pressure at the end of the day. Even though we were to take them charitably and say that, sure, people watch these movies because of peer pressure, that is that then, peer pressure exists because of peer pressure is going to exist because of something being good at the end of the day. You're not going to, okay, the question I would ask them, why don't people have peer pressure to watch the Yuga Wood movies they talk about? It's because their quality is not like very good that someone is going to go around and start posting a Yuga Wood movie to then to then raise the peer pressure that everyone is going to start watching it at the end of the day. What this shows you is that the amount of attention or peer pressure that these particular superhero movies get is because of the quality and the time that the producers give to these movies to make them up to the standard that people are going to want to watch them and recommend their friends to watch them at the end of the day. So moving on to like the characterization or what our world necessarily looks like at the end of the day. The first layer of characterization is going to be about how this genre actually looks like at the end of the day. First, can I be heard or I'm breaking? Okay, so I think
You
I'm
can
going
be
to.
heard. I was hearing you. I don't know why Versant wasn't hearing you, but you were loud and clear on my side.
Okay, how many minutes do I have? Sorry, I forgot to pause my time.
You are exactly at 4:20.
Okay, so okay, resuming in 3, 2, 1, go. So, Chia, what I was going to was then the characterization of like our side. Firstly, on what this genre looks like. Notice then, Chia, that how the genre looks like on our side of the house. It's like what first prop then part of what you talked about, that in most cases these movies have a villain who is doing something bad, and then they have a superhero who in most cases is going to like fight off the villain, and in most cases these superheroes in most have like supernatural abilities at the end of the day. But the main issue that the main thing that should draw your attention in what this genre looks like is that, notice, Cha, firstly there is an
POI.
aspect of
POI.
having a problem and the possibility. I'll talk to you later. There is an aspect of firstly having a problem and the possibility to solve it, but then also secondly, Cha, notice that then there is a problem, and in most cases there is a lot of light put on who solves the problem, how they solve the problem, and the fact that the problem is being solved at the end of the day. What this characterization shows you is that, notice that, Cha, in most cases you're going to get things like in what it shows you is that in most cases from these particular movies you're having a problem that is being solved, but then also secondly it's not just about the problem, it's about who solves the problem and how they solve it. What this shows is that in most cases people are going to come in and like express their views through these particular things at the end of the day. Now moving on to like the other layer of characterization is on like why this sort of genre exists, or why a producer would even put their money into this. The first thing is on the fact that in most cases this is
POI.
the back of most people's creativity. I'll take you. What's your POI?
Okay, our counterfactual looks like when all things affiliated to that extremely unrealistic plotline don't exist, and we have more realism, so we don't have that manipulation. You need to engage that comparative.
Okay, Cha, notice that they talk about that in most cases, that side of the house only wants to talk about realism existing. Let me show you why that is bad. Notice, Cha, that in most cases, what my first layer of characterization was showing you, that in most cases, there is a problem that is then going to be solved. What problems do we have? You have, for example, a villain attacking the city and threatening to kill them. Yeah. And then you have a superhero who is in most cases going to come in and solve this problem and like put the villain behind bars or kill that particular villain. What does this look like in real life? You have, for example, rebels coming and attacking a country and promising to kill everyone at the end of the day. Cha, why their side is then necessarily bad at the end of the day is that it's going to traumatize people at the end of the day, and the movies are not going to get buy-in for people to watch them at the end of the day. Notice, Cha, that on the side of the house we managed to like lighten the mood of like the actual problem and make these things noticeable for people, or even clear for people to understand at the end of the day. On the side of the house, Cha, when you have a very serious real life problem portrayed to people in its actual sense, you're going to realize that firstly, not many people are going to get buy-in to then watch these things and know that in most cases they can easily be solved at the end of the day. But then also secondly, you're going to get a lot of trauma coming in from people because there is no sense of humor that people can relate to or to lighten the mood at the end of the day. That is the reason why on that side of the house, when they have realism, you don't even get to solve the problem, but on the side of the house, why you have to solve the problem. Moving on to like, yeah. I'm just going to continue. Moving on to like the other law of characterization is then in most cases why these movies exist. Firstly, it's on the fact that this is the backbone of people's creativity at the end of the day. This is then the reason why people are creating these movies is because because that is where their skills lie, or that is where they can best perform in these particular industries at the end of the day. But then also notice, Cha, that in most cases you're going to realize but I think my time is done.
Okay, thank you for that fine speech, and I'd like to invite the member of government to continue the case for government here.
Just a second. Okay. So yeah, my speech will be starting now. But we think it's rather like sort of funny to suggest that when persons actually want like actual depictions of life, you rather would like to call them out as humorless and rather call them out as people who don't have the whole sense of humor. Pardon, from my speech, this is what you're going to get. Firstly, you're going to get clarity on what the clash was in the opening halves. Then secondly, I'm just going to like sort of rebuild on what Janet said in her first speech. Then thirdly, I'll like run another extension about this. The first thing, Pando, we think the clash, like in the whole first speeches, is a whole thing about whether like the whole sort of realism is important and how necessary it is to like what steps must be taken address like problems that necessarily happen. Notice Janet comes in her speech and tells you how like the whole depiction of like this sorts of superhero movies necessarily look like. She tells you that she thinks that these are things that are built on lies. She tells you like two key things majorly happen. First is that one, they build like this whole sorts of movies on terrorism or terrorists that don't necessarily occur. This properly like clashes out or removes the whole thing that Liz tried to run, how these movies are like run to depict what necessarily happens online. But just like a whole clear illustration of this, we think that there was no like sort of let's say in like the series The Penguin, the whole sort of flooding that took place that wiped out an entire continent. We think nothing like that can ever happen in life. This sort of justifies or gives you a clear picture of what Janet said, where he says that these movies are necessarily like built out on lies. But then secondly, even if we are to whole sort of like accept what Liz tried to tell us about how they are then engineering trying to sort out like real life issues and how our side then becomes like humorless and dangerous. We think this is actually what happens on their end. Because firstly, they do things in extremism. That is to say, they paint out this whole sort of problems on extremism, such as the whole sort of flooding thing I told you. We think that then the whole sort of violence or the whole sort of scaring people then happens in their case. Just to clarify on what our counterfactual tried to run, Pano, we think that we tried to tell you that what anyone will actually want is like the whole sort of realism. We think that they would actually want to like watch things that depict what actually happens in their world. But even if they wanted to watch things that actually like happen in other people's world, let's say in the Western world, we think what they would rather want is the whole sort of the actual picture and no lies. They also try to run to the whole thing about preferences and everything. But Pano, and this is like very clear, I just want to mark this quote. This is like the whole foundation of their case. But notice that in most instances, these preferences are not actually preferences. Notice that one, we think that they were actually like sort of forceful or they were taken in like the lack of existence of other alternatives. And this will like bite the other whole other idea about how other genres were like sort of suppressed. Notice that the only reason why people were forced to actually believe in this whole sort of superhero genre is that the others, or like other genres, for people to actually watch and believe it, were not there. But even secondly, notice the reason that's why these preferences then become harmful, that they become manipulative. That is to say that they engineer the way how these people actually like need to think and force them to think in ways that are not realistic. And you think like for like the whole sort of debate, the whole sort of for which is debate runs the youth, when that becomes harmful, so that the ones that like the whole sort of future or the whole sort of the future of the world then runs to. I want to extend on what Janet then talked about. She talked about glorification of the superhero genres, and she told that this becomes harmful because then neglects the actual real life heroes. I'll tell you why this thing is so bad, why this is detrimental. Notice that the whole problem with this is that this real life sort of heroes or people like who are fighting against climate change and so on, what be incentivized to actually like continue their fight. But even second, even if they continue, they won't necessarily have like that whole sort of efficiency so to have that issue. Why? Because necessarily what you're then going to have is they're going to have distraction, they're going to have like less attention to them. When you flip it into like our sort of world or the world we prefer, where you have like an equitable ground, you don't have this superhero genre. What you then have is what a real depiction of these real life issues. Secondly, a whole like sort of buying and not buying things. But then thirdly, like more taking into like effort to sort out these issues that people actually front to. In my extension, I just want to run like two things. Firstly, I want to talk about how this genre sort of denied us realism. But notice that the superhero things that Janet told you and as she asserted is that they were run on things of like fake life instances. But then secondly, I want to like run like the best case, even if they were actually real. Panel, notice there were foundations on things such as extremism, and not extremism in and of itself, like literally, but extremism in violence. Panel, the problem with this is that they were necessarily founded on things such as like the existence of villains, that's to say, sort of conflicts. The harm here is that it became harmful to the extent that they depicted a whole scenario where the only like sort of solution or the only sort of way to address things such as conflict was violence. That is like sort of characterized by like the whole sorts of like blood scenes that we have in movies, or like the whole sorts of like harmful wars that you then have in superhero movies. The second reason as to why like this was so sort of genre then denied us like realism is that they then made these like sort of superheroes all great. That's not that they put them above the law, but even secondly, they glorified their acts outside the law. Things such as murder, things such as like sort of killing people, things such as robbing people, they made them all seem good. The third thing here is that they gave this for absolute power. And the reason why this becomes harmful is that they created a sort of like power imbalance. That is so that they justified this for going on to abuse power because they were simply like gifted, they were not like other humans. The reason as to why this becomes harmful, or the impacts of like this whole sort of then like notion is that you make other people then feel like inferior, you create like unrealistic inferiority. But even secondly, even if this was sort of considered like all good, you then create like a whole sort of like unrealistic hope. This is that you make people believe that there are those people who are actually gifted the extent of this talent, that people such as them, those who don't have this gift or talent, are not meant to exist. We think this is harmful. I want to just like extend on the whole sort of like suppressing other genres and why this is then dangerous, like the whole sort of the entertainment industry. The first thing here is that we need to notice how like other genres were built. We think things such as Bollywood that Lamaro loves to watch were necessarily like foundation in like different like sorts of like geopolitical areas. Let's say that there were foundation to address or rather represent what those areas are like deeply invested in. The harm here, or the harm that superhero genre then presents to these people, is that it removes that whole sort of bind that they would have had. That's like for grow up when they're less foundation in their cultures, when they're less foundation in the ideals that their societies run from. We think that this then becomes harmful because why? You then like lose out the whole sort of benefits you would have gotten, things such as like large job opportunities, or like things such as like large like manifestation of like these good ideas societies have. But even secondly, you then remove that whole sort of your political balance that any other rational person would have. As I close, we think a world that has equity in and of itself as foundation in equity is a world that anyone would vote for and are proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you for that very fine speech. I'll now like to invite the next speaker for the opposition team here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please, you're loud and clear.
Okay. So I'll begin my speech. Wait for my background to clear up a bit. Is that okay?
If they can put on mine.
Yes, please, but hurry up.
Okay. You can hear me properly now?
Yes, you're clear.
Okay, my speech will begin in 3, 2, 1. Chair, I think the most dangerous assumption we get from side proposition is that in their world, or in our world, they believe that because you simply watch a superhero movie, you can't watch another movie. That the mere fact that I choose to watch Aquaman means I want to go ahead to choose to watch another movie like a romance movie. I think that assumption is inherently problematic because it fuels most of the claims of their case that people are going to necessarily suppress other genres. What do we tell you on this point? Understand that other genres exist, they are not suppressed. The reason why people choose to watch a certain thing is because it maximizes their preference. So I'm going to show you why maximizing your preference or why choice is important later on in my speech. Tell you that because these people want to maximize their preference, at a point in time, they may choose to watch Aquaman, but at another point in time, they may choose to watch, let's say, 5 Feet Apart. We want side proposition to come here and show us why you choosing to watch a superhero movie is bad. Chair, understand that they also talk about how necessarily that this genre is going to influence children to change the world and that we are sort of unrealistic. I think this was the biggest clash or the biggest thing that came from their side, and I'm going to show you how we win on that clash of unrealism. Chair, understand that superhero movies, as my first speaker said, try their best to tackle real life problems. We give you examples like Aquaman, who tried to tackle the issue of climate change. We think at that point in time, where they themselves try their best to show you or to embody real life problems in their narrative and in their movies, we think it is important that they can't, that side proposition can't come here and claim that it's going to be unrealistic. That even if you don't buy that analysis, other genres in Hollywood are also unrealistic. They come and talk about things like, okay, you can choose other genres, but romance in and of itself tries to paint an image of a soulmate that you will always find love. See that in and of itself doesn't cater for the realism that you experience in the world. I think it can't stand in a world where they don't show us why unrealism is exclusive to our side when they still have it. I think another issue is when they try to talk about the manipulation that exists on our side. We think manipulation exists on both sides of the world. We tell you that inherently it is much harder to manipulate this superhero genre. Why? Because of a vast amount of buy-in and a vast amount of attention paid on it. And because it is trying its best to depict real world problems and depict how it is impacted. We see Aquaman that called out people who are doing things like climate change, polluting the environment. See that because of that, manipulation is much more less likely. But yeah, I think one of the biggest considerations for the side proposition to win was to show us an exclusive harm that superhero genre has that doesn't exist on any other world, and that it enables why it should necessitate us to actually ban it. So I think another thing we get from their second speaker is the extremism of violence in superhero movies. Three responses. Two responses. One, understanding most superhero movies, they don't actually advocate for violence. The reason why superheroes exist is to put down people who you show wanton violence. That is to say, they put down people like the Joker who are just going around and killing people. At a point in time where the way that the superheroes do this in and of itself tries to minimize casualties and avoid killing people, I think they can't come and claim that there's going to be extremism or violence. We think that on a comparative on their side, there are movies that actually happen or realistically, movies that show that World War One, World War Two, and the situation there inherently promote more violence or show more extremism or violence because it shows you continual death of people and continual suffering. I think that in and of itself shows extremism of death is on their side. But what are our two arguments? One, our first argument is that we tell you choice is important. We tell you that people have the ability to choose what they consider best for them as long as it doesn't go against the law. We tell you that banning or removing the superhero genre is going to go against this choice. Why? On two levels. First, on the people who make these movies, and two, on the audience who watch them. I understand that the producers are people who choose to express themselves in a form of the superhero genres. They choose to take around, look at the situation around them, and actually see that, okay, I want to express it in this way. We think that that point in and of itself shows you that they necessarily choose. I think that at a point in time where you ban this superhero genre, you're going to limit these producers' ability to choose to express it in a certain way. That is to say, some people are more inclined to express it in, let's say, a superhero way, or in a romance way, or in an action way. I think individuals in and of itself are unique. That's why I have my own way of speaking. Verasant has his own way of speaking. The ability to choose how you want to express it is inherent and shouldn't be infringed on. On the audience, we tell you that the audience choose movies to watch. That is to say that there is supposed to be a selection for them to choose. At a point in time, while you actually restrict the ability to choose the movies you watch, I think that in and of itself is synonymous with dictatorial regimes. How do these regimes look like? Look at these regimes, and how I'm going to show you why it's synonymous with the side propositions world, is that they suppress their people who are actually expressing themselves. Is to say they suppress their competitors. They don't allow them to choose to express themselves in a way, and they deny them the ability to do this in terms of campaigning. I think that is synonymous with the aspect of producers because you're denying them the ability to express themselves in terms of making movies. Second, on the citizens, we think that necessarily these regimes leave these citizens with only one of few choices to pick from at a point in time where you ban these superhero movies, you're restricting on these audiences or in the citizens' ability to choose from, or their large best to choose from. I think that in and of itself is synonymous with what we said. We tell you choice is important. Why? Because individuals are unique in nature. That is to say, they desire to express this through their choices. That is why the UN places high. That's why choice is one of the human rights. That's why the government in and of itself says that the only time you should restrict on right like choice is when they go against crime. I think it is problematic when side proposition does not show us a significant impact that people having watching these superhero movies have. We think that the best impact that they bring is going to be all people are going to look at it unrealistically, and it's going to. I won't show you why exactly this has a better impact in our world. Second, we think this argument in and of itself is important is because side proposition should have and has failed to defend a world that denies people on choice on two fronts, the audience and the producers of these movies. But yeah, moving to our second argument. Our second argument is on how our world, where you have this genre, actually promotes a better world. How? We think that it promotes a better world through the impact it has on people. Impact it has on people. How? We see that inherently when individuals watch these movies, they are encouraged to be. Why? Because people buy into superhero views. That is to say, they think they are cool and admire them. So they're more likely to do things like try to follow the views that they propagate. The views that they propagate look like things like stop being good, being kind, helping others. I think that inherently is good because you're going to have more people actively working for a better society. I think inherently that means you're going to have a better society in and of itself, but you're going to have better individuals getting better self-actualization. So, Chair, unaware of what the side proposition give you and what do we give you and why do we basically? I think the biggest thing that we get from side proposition, even if you consider all the analysis to be true, is that okay, this extremism of violence, it suppresses other genres and it's going to influence people to change the world. We bring you and we show you why inherently this extremism of violence doesn't exist or it exists to a minimal level. Two, we show you that in and of itself, you influencing these children to be the best they can be is good because you promote a better world. And three, and most importantly, we tell you that we uphold people's choice, we don't restrict on their freedoms, and we get a better world. I think at a point in time where side proposition does not show us an exclusive harm brought about specifically by the superhero genre, you can't consider their case and they can't.
Okay, thank you for that fine speech. I'll now like to invite the government whip here.
Yeah, cool. Am I audible?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Just give me a second. Set up a timer. I'm trying to set up another device. 8 minutes. Okay, guys, for your eyes, please don't unmute. Don't unmute. I will ask for them. If I don't ask for them, sorry, but I'm going to try my very best to ask for at least one pure eye, right? Okay, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. The one fundamental thing that team opposition fails to consider is that when you actively manipulate people into believing in a particular thing that is not realistic, that does not truly depict the actual things that are happening in society, you actively then reduce the buy-in individuals have to fight the problems that exist there. This is what we are pushing for on our side, and this is why we tell you we prefer a world that does not have this superhero genre. We think there's not been enough engagement on that particular end, and I think at that point, when if you think you're going to get my speech, first of all, I'm going to provide a good amount of clarity. Then I'll give good engagement on what they have said, and lastly, I'll just do a big way up on the clash with potency. First of all, on clarity. I highlighted this in the POI, and Versant and Jeanette tried to tell this to you, but team opposition fails to consider. We see that in and of itself, our counterfactual looks like a world where all flashiness does not exist. That is to say, all things that are affiliated to this manipulative flashiness does not exist. So any unrealistic line of plot, anything that is really not unrealistic, that is not really not realistic, and is not in line with what realism would suggest, that is what exists in our world. Like those things don't exist. This is what I was trying to say. And I highlighted this in a POI. It means the only way you're able to appeal to individuals in that particular world is on your ability to provide value to those particular individuals. That is to say, they don't have that decision-making calculus on that they like flashiness, because we're assuming that this thing didn't exist. So they don't have that mental schema of loving flashiness. If they don't have the mental schema on loving flashiness, the alternative that exists for producers to then appeal to individuals is providing actual value. Vasant tells you what this actual value looks like. He says this actual value looks like a proper depiction of what exists in society. I think it's generally uncharitable. I think, Abala, please stop that. I think it's generally uncharitable for team opposition to say that we depict like really bad extremisms. I think you cannot really run such extremes in your case, because it's quite unrealistic why people are going to be showing real depiction of bloodshed onto youths and onto children. I think the age categories are cater for that, and parental guidance and all those sort of things. That's kind of like a wash, not something that I'm going to debate. What it means then is, on our side, there is an active incentive on producers in themselves to provide actual value to individuals. What it means then is the depiction you get is on proper things in reality, on the way they actually. So there is this level playing field where this manipulation doesn't exist, meaning that other genres that don't have this flashy depiction are not being suppressed. But then secondly, there is actual depiction and actual buying in into what society actually looks like. A more analysis you get on this in rebuttal. So let's just give you a few rebuttals here. First of all, they say that in response to our frame that more like other people watch, like that is say the older generation watch. I think we said youth, not specifically children. We think youth look like children to about people 30 to 35 years old. It means the extent to which the older individuals buy in is less. So the majority of people that buy into this thing is the youth. I think that's clarity that's needed. But then secondly, they say that they depict real problems in society. That is to say, when they make a movie about Wonder Woman, it depicts things about feminism and why women are empowered. We think that is true. But why can't there just be a proper, normal, nuanced depiction of these problems? Why can't we just skip all the flashy cinematic effects and get people into buy into those problems because of the actual solvency or the actual value the movie provides? Why can't we just make people attach actual value to these valuable things? Bro, Abala, please stop spamming the chat. Thanks. I think they don't show why that is necessary. Why do you need to have that manipulative flashes? They don't show that, so they lose out on that, right? And second, they say that choice is something important, and they give this to us on two aspects. First, they say to the people, but then second, they say to the producers. First thing that Vasant tells you, and something Janat tells you when they gave that POI, they say that choice is not something valuable as long as it's manipulated. The point we are manipulating people with flashy cinematic effects, and you're directly like manipulating their mental calculus, it means that choice is not something valuable to those individuals. On the flip, however, on our side, where we don't have these unrealistic things, it means the only way people actually choose to do, like to watch a movie or buy into that movie, is based on the value they attach to that movie, because that like depicts actual things and actual atrocities that they are facing in society. That is what it looks like. But then secondly, on the front of producers, I think producers want money. And the reason why they then do these things like with superhero movies is because they want money, and like the environment has been stifled to want money. It means that producers then just do these things so that they can compete and get money. They don't do it because they want to depict it in that way. It's because the narrative that exists in that particular regard is that you have to depict it in that way so that you can get buy-in for that movie. I think those are a few things that are needed in this debate. Before I go on the clash of solvency, Abala should, so that you can stop spamming. Quickly.
So you agree that people watch based on what they attach value to or they prefer? Yes or no?
Okay. Going on, let me just respond to that, bro. I tell you, why can't we skip all the manipulative flashiness to buy us individuals? Why can't we skip that? You don't show why that has to be there. We then say we can skip that on our side with a nuanced depiction of what actually happens without all those extreme, like unrealistic things and all those things associated. It means we don't manipulate people. Your choice is manipulative. On our side, it is not manipulative because we give people a chance to attach actual value to those things without manipulating them to attach value to those things. That is what our side looks like. I hope that's clear. On to the clash of solvency. I think when I show you my clarity, it becomes very intuitive why we not solvency. Because Vasant tells you a few things. First, he tells you how these individuals are. Bro, Abala, please stop. First, he tells you how these individuals necessarily get more incentive, like these freedom fighters, these guys who fight for social justice, these climate activists get more incentive in our world than to fight more. He tells you that one, when you depict actual things that happen in society, when you shed more light on these particular things, when you shed more light on these particular things, there is a discussion that comes up to those particular things about those particular things. When you have that, people actively then get more awareness on these things. But given that you've depicted it in a movie, people then buy into that thing. The reason why buy into things like social movements and things that I'm fighting for, like a better society at the end of the day, is important, is because those movements are then able to get funding. Those movements are then able to get platform to do what they want to do, to make these sort of advocacies, because they have a significant number of people. The reason why that is true on our side is because in the mechanism in which we disseminate information, the mechanism in which we disseminate, like the mechanism in which we depict what is happening in society, is quite realistic and quite valuable. On the flip, however, when they're trying to depict those particular things, what they then do is they depict nonsense, which drives individuals away from the real, like, things they're supposed to be looking at, and they go on to like about the fashions. We think what it looks like is people are having engagement on how good the special effects are, how good the sound effects are, instead of engaging on how good the problem, like the solvency of the problem is. Instead of people discussing about how to solve the problem. This is something they have to defend in our world, and this is something that doesn't exist in our world, because we give people chance to attach actual value to those things. With all that being said, here.
Okay, thank you for that fine speech. I'd now like to invite the opposition whip to sum up the debate. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Okay. Could you please not unmute to ask POIs, because that would largely disorganize me. So I'm going to start my speech in 3. Sorry, I'm so sorry. 2, 1. So, panel, I'm going to do a few key things in my speech, right? I'm going to show you what the debate should have been or should have looked like, the debate that happened, and why we still win on those particular grounds, right? Notice, panel, in a preference motion, it's not enough to point out the harms that exist within a certain side of the house, right? That essentially means this motion was an entirely comparative motion. That means that proposition had the burden to show us exactly what the world would look like, which they failed to do, hence leaving a lot of playground for these to actually assume, right? But don't fault us for that. They have to show us exactly what the world essentially looks like, how the harms that they exclusively argue exist on outside the house don't exist on their house, and why comparatively the world is essentially better. Notice A, panel, they fail to show us what the world essentially looks like, right? But then secondly, notice they fail to show us the exclusive harm that exists with the superhero genre essentially has to be done away with. They failed to do that, right? But before I before I continue, basically let me do a few rebuttals and then I go on the clashes, right? First thing is on characterization. Notice, panel, Janat gives you a very unfair characterization of how we think this debate happens because children are largely the ones who buy into these particular movies. She doesn't show us why adults are less likely to opt into this. But then even secondly, I think Liz does a very good job of breaking this particular frame and show you why these particular movies are done on to a watch by a wider viewership, right? On an extension panel, we still think that these movies are curated to attract different audiences. That is to say, as a parent, I'm less likely to let my child go and watch something like Deadpool versus Wolverine because it's rather explicit, but I'm going to more like you let them watch Henry Danger, right? I'm the one who's going to be most inclined to go and watch something like Batman in and of itself. The impact of this is to show you that buy-in in and of itself, or watching of these particular things happen on a bigger scope, her characterization was unfair. But then secondly, she comes and talks about suppression of genres and coercion, right? 2 key responses. 1, I think Micah shows you that within these particular things, there's not enough characterization as to why I'm going to stop watching 5 Feet Apart or it ends with that suddenly just because a Batman movie is out, right? Notice there is not enough characterization within those particular grounds. But I think secondly, basis on principle of utilitarianism, right? People are more likely to buy into something that they want to like watch in and of itself, right? They want to maximize their preferences. That is to say, other genres still get to have their sort of like market in and of itself because people still want to watch it end with us. We still want to watch The Notebook in and of itself. They fail to show us why that particular thing exists. But then lastly, what Janat like tells you is like on the whole idea of coercion. She says that, or we think that people like we think that people are not going to like people are going to like be coerced to watch this. Notice, panel, the rationality of actors that essentially exists within status quo. And I think Micah tries to show you this, that people are going to watch things that they want to watch. There's like a less bit of coercion, right? But even on coercion, I think I'm going to show you in my Wayne of the Clashes why it's still something that benefits us. Secondly, on like DPM, what we get from Vasant, right? Vasant spills the biggest lies on the side of the house. He says that, hey, we think these particular things are like unreal and that's why they're inherently bad. Notice he fails to engage in the comparative of why it's real for me to imagine butterflies in my stomach when a man says he loves me. He fails to engage in the comparative while I'll suddenly become Mary Poppins and be a fairy godmother in and of itself. Notice realism is not something that is like something that you can co-opt in this debate because it's something that is not exclusive to that side of the house, right? But then secondly, he says that, or we think these things are extreme and they scare people. Notice even in movies without superheroes, there's still extremist measure. The lack of exclusivity that Vasant fails to give you should like is a reason why he's like things like should not fly in this particular debate, right? Then he comes and he says that, or we think you glorify superheroes above the law and you glorify the acts outside. I think this is the only thing that buys it, that like stands in his particular case. Notice Micah shows you already that you essentially these particular superheroes are against the things that they do, right? Are against like certain acts like murder in and of itself, and they're like call outs within these particular things. That is to say, even in that bid to like have some sort of like justice in and of itself, they're not below the law. I think there is enough mechanism to show you as to why these particular things don't exist the way he says it is, right? And then basically what we get from Ryan is the whole thing of like no actual value in and of itself that we get from it. Notice to an extent where you argue that there is buy-in for these particular things, then there's some sort of value because people buy into things that attach value to. I think he knifes himself in that particular things, right? On to the clashes of this page. One, on the whole idea of platform for change, right? Not accepted. Janet comes and says that, or hey, we think that you don't have like some sort of like platform for change because like it's not like realistic, right? I think I'm going to like handle it on like realism, right? Notice right from Lizzie's page, we're able to show you that we get viewership for these particular things, but within that particular viewership, we also get viewership for problems that exist within status quo. That is to say, we are more likely to co-opt or incorporate things like sexism, things like racism, and Black Lives Matter and climate change that Micah talks about to this in these superhero movies. That is to say, because of the large buy-in we have, we are able to get a platform for change by actually making sure that people get to see these particular things, right? That is to say, essentially, we get to address crucial issues that exist within status quo. But then on realism, notice this is something that is not exclusive on that side of the house. But then secondly, let's do a worst case and best case scenario, right? They say our worst cases are, oh, these particular problems are not realistic in and of itself. Therefore we are lying to people. I think Liz tells you that the reason why we make these particular things extreme, like you say, is to make sure that people buy into it. But notice, even if you're to buy into the impacts, we still get some sort of like viewership. We still get some sort of like acknowledgement of issues that exist within status quo. I think that's a trade-off we are willing to make, right? But then secondly, on the whole idea of like manipulation and coercion, right? That essentially comes from like Vasant's speech. Notice again, there is no exclusivity of harms, right? For them to have flown this particular like thing, they have to show us why essentially manipulation only exists on our side of the house. We tell you the entire freaking entertainment industry is manipulative, for Christ's sake. I mean, they manipulated us to believe that white people are the only people who know English. They manipulated us to believe that, or we think that doctors are the best thing that exists within status quo in and of itself, right? So we think for him to have bought for us to buy into this argument, they have to show us why manipulation is something that is exactly exclusive, right? But then secondly, on the whole idea of manipulation, right? To an extent where we are able to incorporate social issues, things like sexism in and of itself, we think that manipulation is a trade-off that we are going to make so that we get buy-in for these particular problems, right? But then secondly, I think to an extent where Vasant argues that, oh, we suppress these particular genres because you're now manipulating people to other genres. We think that manipulation is more possible on that side of the house where there's a suppressed genres. That is to say, we're going to to try other ways to like get more buy-in, right? So the intuition pump here is that you're more likely to manipulate people in and of itself. And then the whole idea of like coercion in and of itself, like notice Pano, I think because of utilitarianism, people just don't like want to go and watch things because like they do it. For Christ's sake, I don't even like the Avengers, but Micah, my teammate, loves the Avengers. That does not essentially mean that I'm going to want to buy into those particular things. Notice the logical inconsistency, right? But then secondly, on coercion, we think then in and of itself, even if we coerce people to buy into these particular things, there is no inherent and exclusive harm that comes from that side of the house. And then lastly, that Ryan tries to like add new matter in third speech is the whole idea of value. We think we still get value from these superhero genres. That is to say, we are able to co-opt people into understanding certain narratives that exist within status quo, but most importantly, we are able to like incorporate like choice, right? I'm not going to extend on what Micah has already done to show why choice is particularly important in this particular side of the house. And to an extent where you argue for buy-in to be existent, we think essentially buy-in can only exist when people attach value to certain things. We think value is still attached to these particular things on that side of the house. They can't win on this particular thing. If you don't take anything from my speech, check this. For proposition to have won this particular debate, they had to show us exclusive harms that exist within these particular genres. That is something that we don't buy into. They fail to do that. They can't win this debate. I rest my case.
Okay, thank you for the fine speech. I'll now like to invite the opposition reply to start off the reply. Here.
Okay, I hope that I am audible. I will be beginning 3, 2, 1. Chair, we think at a point in time when side proposition is unable to call out their own teammate for mistakes they did, but blame the other side without considering that their teammate made the same mistakes, shows what exactly has been going on in this whole debate. How? They keep claiming that we have issues on our side without pausing to consider or even think about the fact that in reality, those problems are symmetric and exist on their side. But here, what do they tell us? What are the implications? What is their best case and why do we win? So first, what do they tell us? They tell us specifically in their third speech that people only watch things if they attach value to it. I think I also want to talk about, he also said that choice really shouldn't be a consideration. Understand why these two things are in contradiction and why, even if you don't think they're in contradiction, the fact that if people watch things only because they attach value to it agrees with our case. The implication to the fact that you watch something that you attach value to is that you are maximizing your preference. That is to say, what I would attach value to is different from what you would attach value to. I think that's very intuitive analysis that came up in all of our speeches. But the fact that you would watch different things means that inherently you're maximizing choice. We tell you that banning or removing this superhero genre is going to minimize the choice. Second, they tell us that inherently there's going to be coercion of people to watch these superhero genres in our world. I think one thing they have to understand is that coercion, one, is more likely on their side. I think this is an implication that they don't get with their whole case, and two, a response we got from Lamaro. So first, on how coercion is much exists on their side, it comes up in my second speech where we tell you that at a point in time, by limiting these people's choice and forcing them to pick from a redacted list, you are coercing them away from options that they maybe would have preferred. Tell you that is problematic because you go against choice and it is coercion. I think that is much more problematic than any form of coercion that they claim is on our side. Because at least on our side, even if you try to believe their point of coercion, you have the ability to opt out and opt into another genre. That is to say romance, that is to say action, that is to say any other thing that you could want. We think that another thing we need from that speaker is that she tells you that peer pressure in and of itself, and even in my first speaker, peer pressure in and of itself wouldn't have that much of an impact because you are going to watch what you want. You're going to try your best to maximize your preferences. So if I personally like Avengers, or for her she likes romance, she will watch romance even if I watch Avengers when she's on her own. We don't see why coercion in and of itself is really such a big consideration. It's really going to force people to watch superhero movies. But yeah, I think more importantly than that, and the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues with side proposition is that they fail to show us impacts of a lot of things they say. They tell us that, okay, unrealism is going to be there. I'm going to cater for unrealism and show you why that's their best case. But they don't trust the impact of unrealism. They don't trust the impact of this coercion and why those things are bad. We think you can't credit those arguments. So, what's their best case and why do they still lose on it? We think their best case is going to be unrealism. We think that in and of itself is the only thing that can be their best case. Why? Because all the other things they fronted for do not coexist or do not apply or work under reality. The point of extremism or violence really does not apply in a superhero genre. According to the analysis we gave you, the thing of the genre suppressing other genres does not apply to reality because you can maximize your preference and choose to watch another thing. I think that even when you consider that as their best case, we tell you that one, even if it's unrealistic, you're going to have people who want to do better in society. That is, you're going to have people trying their best to help their society. We think just the impacts alone will win that. But two, we tell you that in and of itself, it's these people's choice to buy into that unrealistic expectation or that unrealistic thinking. I think that at that point in time, inherently, you're going to have people justified for it to be unrealistic, especially when they don't trust why it's being unrealistic is bad on these people or on society. With that, I think we win.
Okay, thank you very much for that fine speech. I now invite the opposition whip to sum up the debate. Here.
Audible?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Okay, I'll just set up. Mommy, I'm coming. Sorry about that. I'll just set up my timer and then begin. Alright, so I'll begin in 3, 2, 1. Chat. What case do we then get from both sides and why do we think that Team Prop still wins? Team Ops best case comes in as choice. They tell us about how choice is important and how they think that it is much better that people maximize their sort of like options and all that. I think this is something that is actually twofold. These guys keep on telling us of how when we sort of like ban or like take away superhero movies, then most likely we are sort of like infringing on people's sort of like right to choice. We think that this is actually something that is like something that we think is not like sort of like very important in this debate because firstly they acknowledge the fact that people can always opt out and sort of like watch other movies. So I still think that it is something that is kind of twofold. Either way, even in our side of the house, you can always choose to opt out and watch romance movies like sort of like Cynthia tells you. What then do they come and tell us? They come and tell us that you see, they think that people watch what they attach value to. Notice that people do not like really inherently people would not sort of like attach value to superhero movies if they were not made to look like the way they look like. Notice that people attach value to superhero movies because that is what society has made it look like. People society sort of like makes superhero movies to look like this thing, right? Notice how people then are forced to sort of like jump onto the trend because that is what is looked at as important in society. This is the same thing I always tell you about like teenagers and like youth and that whole idea of peer pressure. Notice that even when I might not want sort of buying into a superhero movie because that is the trend and because we always like want to follow the trend, most likely I'm going to buy into that sort of like movie, right? That entirely means that the whole idea of oh my god choice and all that is sort of limited because either way I'm sort of coerced into buying into that sort of movie. What else do they come and tell us? They come and tell us that you see there's a lot of unrealism and that we need to show why unrealism is then bad. Firstly, these people come and tell us that you see we continuously get to like talk about the challenges that are happening in society and all that. Notice that even at Crane's trials, people fail to understand that the whole Aquaman movie was about like some sort of like climate change and all that. That entirely means that it is quite obvious. People do not like directly get to attach value to what these people want to like sort of depict happens. Notice that it is very unlikely that people are going to notice that Aquaman is actually about climate change, unless TJ of course tells you, right? Or alternatively, it's very like unlikely that people will even understand that Wonder Woman was about, like, some sort of like feminism and all that. That is something that we actually have a problem with, and that is something that we already tell you from our substantives. Notice that people never get to attach value to the whole meaning of the movie, rather the flashiness that comes with it. Notice that I'm most likely going to pay more attention to Wonder Woman's attire as opposed to her feminism and all that, right? So that is something that we already tell from our side of the house, right? But also, secondly, they come and tell us that, you see, by doing that, the whole idea of suppression does not exist here. Notice that we need to acknowledge facts within this debate, right? We think that it is true already that some genres don't like get people to buy into them simply because people look at this sort of like superhero movies to look like a base, right? That entirely means that because of that particular sort of buy-in that these movies already have in society, despite the fact that they're actually like very unrealistic and sort of like problematic, we think that people then do not get to like to buy into other like sort of movies because that is not something that they are made to like, right? Notice that the Yuga does not get so many people buying into it, or like Nollywood and all that, because they lack superheroes. Notice that Hollywood then sells more because they have DC and Marvel, which are like the biggest movie companies, right? That entirely means that to that extent, this sort of like other like production sort of houses are then sort of like limited to that sort of extent, right? That is how the whole idea of suppression then happens, right? But also, Chair, what do we then tell you exists on our side of the house? Firstly, we show you how we then get people to be inspired by real problems and real heroes, right? Notice that it does not take a superhero in a movie to sort of understand that there's feminism, or to sort of like start to care about climate change. We think that it simply takes actual things, right? Notice that I cannot relate basically like some sort of like Wonder Woman sort of issue, but it is much more likely that I'll relate some sort of like fires in California. That is what we think that is actually supposed to be the situation, as opposed to that whole idea of superheroes. But also, thirdly, Chair, what still do we get from our side of the house? Firstly, I show you that their whole idea of choice exists either way, because people can always choose to like watch other like kinds of movies like those guys claim still. But also, secondly, we get people to be inspired by real problems. And thirdly, we think that we then get some sort of like level ground for all sorts of movies, right? Notice that when you do not have superheroes play, we then think that people then can buy into other kinds of movies, as opposed to a world where one sort of like genre is sort of like portrayed to be the best. I beg to rest.
Okay, thank you very much. You went 50 seconds ahead of time. Anyway, thank you for that fine debate. Just give me a few minutes. Call and thank you for the lovely debate.